Jim, for your time. I have 7 children, ranging from 14 to 28. So you can imagine any help is appreciated. When are we going to see more help with cost of living? We need to see a plan, not just talk. Why don't the big energy companies get pressured to give us more relief? Thank you.
Hello. We live in South Australia, my wife and my disabled son. Our last account, electricity account, came to almost $1,600, which is absolutely very expensive. Now, living in Australia, a country with plenty of energy resources, there's no excuse for such a big account for a family of 3 living in a unit. And I read that the prices are going to go even higher next year, maybe about 50%. You know, this is a lot. It's a lot. So could you please let us know how you can help us pay our energy bills?
$1,600 for an electricity bill for a family living in a unit, and it's going to get worse, isn't it?
That's our expectation, and prices, as everybody here knows, certainly Jeff and George know, electricity prices started going up earlier in the year. A big reason for that, which doesn't make it any easier, but the main driver of that is the war in Ukraine, which is causing havoc with global energy markets and pushing up the price of electricity here.
I'm going to stop you there, because this is the conversation that you've been having, and you've been having it for 10 days since the budget. They specifically asked you, what are you going to do?
And I'm keen to get to that. What I want to acknowledge first is that even though these pressures are coming at us from around the world, they are felt around the kitchen table. I do acknowledge that. The work that we are doing now in our government is to work out what kind of intervention we can make in the energy market so that the sorts of price rises that are expected, that are forecast at the moment, don't eventuate.
Okay, so can we go through some of those?
Of course.
Are you going to give a subsidy to people directly to allow them to meet their energy bills?
Well, there are 3 paths that we can choose from. And it's difficult for me as Treasurer to kind of think out loud about these. There's some market sensitivity and there's some work that we're still doing, to be upfront with you, but there are broadly 3 paths. The first path is something in the tax area. The second path is the one that you just referred to, Stan, which is around subsidies, whether that to be to people or to companies. And thirdly, whether there's some kind of change in regulation that can bring the price down.
And in terms of precisely for the reasons you said to Fiona about inflationary pressure, you're not going to give people a cash handout, are you?
That would be unlikely, but we don't want to rule it out, because if this situation continues to deteriorate over time, you want to have all of the options. But our preference is to do something with regulation. And the work that we're doing right now, the work that I was doing even up to coming on the show, is to see with other ministers like Chris Bowen and Ed Husic and Madeleine King and the Prime Minister, whether there's some kind of intervention that we can make to keep these prices down. That's our preference. But we don't want to rule out subsidies or tax. It may be necessary down the track, but let's see if we can do something with regulation first.
When you're talking about regulation, are you talking here about setting a price, about trying to put a lid on the price? And for that, you're going to have to be able to regulate that, hold some of the supply back from going overseas and cap it, aren't you?
Oh, that is one of the options, is around price caps. And a lot of people have made those suggestions to us publicly, that would be one of the options. And that's obviously one thing that we're considering. It's not the only type of regulation, but it's one of the ones that's most commonly suggested to us. We have a little more work to do on this, and so I can't tell you tonight, I can't tell George and Jeff the final conclusion, but to reassure them that we know that electricity prices that began before the electricity price rises, which began before the election, are continuing now and intensifying.
In fact, what you said is over the next 2 years it'll be 56% higher. So that's another $800 that George is going to have to find. So his bill of $1,600 now is going to be $2,400.
Yeah, it's going to be 20% and then 30%. The 20% is already flowing. Some of you are already paying that. That was the price rise that was hidden by our predecessors during the election campaign. That was the front end of it, 20%. We're expecting, or Treasury's expecting, another 30% next year. Obviously, any responsible government confronted with that kind of number and what it means for Jeff and George and for many of you has to consider its options, and that's what we're doing.
If you can't give us an answer now about what intervention will look like, can you give us a timeline? It's been 10 days since the budget. Prices are going up. We know that people are paying more right across the board for inflation. Are we going to see this in the next week, 2 weeks, the next month? How long is it going to take you?
Well, first of all, I know that 10 days can sometimes sound like a long time, but
it does when you're trying to stretch $20.
Yeah, but what we're dealing with here is we've got to balance the fact that a lot of these companies have got international contracts. There's a lot of market sensitivity. I mean, we do care about our reputation as a trading nation. We've got a lot of contracts with Korea and Japan and elsewhere. And so there are a whole bunch of issues associated with this, and it's more complex than it sounds. But that's not a reason not to act here. It's a reason to act in a considered, responsible and sensible way. I think anybody watching the show tonight should expect that the government will move as quickly as they can, Can I talk about before? But there are lots of issues at play.
Before Christmas, are we going to see a plan, a costed plan with detail before Christmas?
That's my intention, yeah, certainly. But as I said, I'm doing my best not to I'm doing my best to be upfront with you about this. We are working on it more or less around the clock right now, and we will move on it as soon as we responsibly can. But there are a lot of complexities here that we need to weigh up. You don't want to make a change here which causes all kinds of unintended consequences elsewhere. We want to get it right, and we'll get it right as soon as we can.